This is going to be a quick video just giving you some guidelines, basic guidelines as to how I want your paper organized. Now, if you want to see the actual nitty-gritty requirements in terms of word count, how many sources you need, minimum, that sort of thing, just go ahead and check work folder 8 or the last work folder in the module. And you'll have all that information there. But here, I want to just give you some ideas as to maybe how to organize your actual substance. All right. And I don't want you to think in terms of paragraphs. I want you to think in terms of sections. And you need to be able to look at your whole paper, that unified thing, that one thing, in terms of different sections. All right. Now, the three fundamentally basic sections are your beginning, middle, and end. And I know things should get more complicated than that, but let's just go ahead and start with that. All right. So we can just kind of look at those three general sections, and then as you work things out, I would encourage you to think maybe in terms of subsections. Now, you don't have to label these sections in your actual paper, but it helps you understand a better way to organize things, and it gives you the proper framework into which you can plug in certain numbers of paragraphs. For example, you should think, well, in this section, I need to define my key term, okay? And I can probably do that in 2 paragraphs. And then in the next section, maybe I should show some recent statistics about something, and I think I can do that in 1 paragraph. And in my closing section, maybe I need to refute objections to my idea, and I might actually need 3 paragraphs for that. So I don't want you to be thinking that I'm going to be counting, the whole number of paragraphs of your paper in terms of, oh, you needed, 8 paragraphs or something. It's up to you. I mean, some of these paragraphs can be very short, and some can be rather long. Now, I think that your essay runs into problems if all you have are very short paragraphs, and so you have like 20 of these things, or if all you have are 3 super long paragraphs. You've managed to swing one way or the other on the ends of the extremes of the spectrum, right? But in the middle, you can have a couple very short paragraphs, 1 medium length paragraph, or 2 or 3 or 5, maybe 1 longish paragraph. You can mix things up. You just have to feel. You have to be aware of how it's going to feel to read your paper. Is it going to be weird if your audience reads 20 very short paragraphs? Is it going to work against you if your paper is just 1 huge paragraph, right? Now, of course, you can see that, right? So I throw that extreme case at you so that you can see that you do have a sense of proper paragraphing and how to vary the length and mix that up. So go ahead and be creative, if you will, with the size of your paragraphs. And I think the same basic rule of thumb applies to the number of paragraphs. I'm never going to give you a number of paragraphs that you need to have, but I think we all can kind of tell when a paper is too short and when a paper is way too long, okay? And so just go ahead and work within the parameters, I guess, of just common sense for this type of essay, right? And again, if you really want to know, well, at least give me a word count. I'm sure, the minimum word count is going to be right there for you in work folder 8. But let's go ahead and talk about the beginning and the middle and the end of your essay. Okay, the very first thing I expect to see is a good title, a good 2-tier title, a main title, and then a subtitle after that, and between the two is a colon or a dash or an exclamation mark or a question mark, but usually it's going to be a colon. Okay, that's your academic 2-tier title. And I really, in neither of those titles do I want to see a research paper or research paper, final research paper, colon. Don't, because remember, you're writing to an audience that ideally is outside of the classroom. Remember the airport lobby? Don't ever tell them you're a student. Don't ever tell them that this is a final research paper for English, a composition class. So be a little creative with that title, and go ahead and make sure that you have one. And then we're, obviously you have your essay body. We'll talk about that in a second, the beginning, middle, end. But then at the end, right after you finish, Right after that, I need a word count statement. And again, just something like word count equals, put the word count. And then after that, produce the works cited. The reason I want that is I don't want your works cited to be counted as your word count. All right. And by the way, I say works cited, that's MLA. If you're doing this paper in APA, then obviously it's going to be a reference list. Okay. And if I didn't specify in the instructions that I wanted an MLA or an APA, I usually give you the choice of whichever one you want. Okay. Of course, if I do say I wanted an MLA, then do it in that. If I say I wanted an APA, do it in that. But if I don't, if I say you can choose, then just make sure you get your titles right in terms of works cited or reference list, things like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at what I have here. I know that it's going to read, small in the video, but maybe you can pause and expand the screen or whatnot. But I'll obviously give you the verbal rendition of this. So the beginning, there are a couple ways you can open your paper. I've just listed 4, but they're more than that. So don't think that you have to use one of these. The important thing also to remember is that these are not to be used in together, all clumped together. Just pick one of the 4, as an opening strategy. So you can start with a stunning or strange fact. Maybe you're researching mental health and you ran across this crazy statistic that says 1 out of 5 Americans at one point in their life, if they were to walk into a clinic, can actually be diagnosed with a mental illness. That's 1 out of 5 of us. That's incredible, So, maybe you want to start with a stunning fact. Okay. Now remember, in the big picture of this, your job is to create interest, maintain it, and reward it. So that definitely creates interest. In fact, your job at the beginning, right, is to create interest. So maybe the next thing you can do is start with an anecdote or a personal story. Now, I get this question a lot from students: is to what extent can I use my own experience? I mean the student's own experience in their paper. And I would say, well, if you have a certain experience that has happened to you, and definitely that has played a part in bringing you to this point of belief, but unfortunately, it's never going to be viewed as evidence. I mean, obviously, it is a sort of evidence, but it's just the evidence from one case. You, right? You might be the exception. So, that personal experience you had might get you thinking that other people like you in similar situations will have similar experiences, and then your job as a researcher is to go and see if that's actually the case, to do surveys, polls, whatever, and to get that data, right? But you shouldn't use your one experience as evidence, in the middle of your paper where you're really establishing the reason you believe what you believe. Okay, but you can certainly use it to open the story, right? To open your essay, because no one expects you to present a piece of your core evidence, right there at the beginning. That's probably one of the better places for anecdote and personal experience. So maybe that's a way you can start. Another way to begin is to maybe to describe a very important event in your research, but describe it with a lot of detail. As if it's through the eyes of a certain person that was there. You're talking about the way, the way that electric car is going to feel, or the self-driving car, right? And their prototypes already. Maybe you found a description of how it rides, and you're pretending to put someone in there, your reader, and you're describing, the driving shaft, which what do you do with that? Is it minimized at the small? You're describing the sound. You're describing the smoothness of the ride, the weirdness of not having to make decisions. What's going on here is a very, very concrete description of a certain event or occurrence or incident or person involved in your research, and it's a concrete anchoring because there's so much like real detail that it's able to really maybe sometimes grab your reader and keep them with you at the beginning because they're visualizing it. So you're visualizing a scene for them, So maybe you're researching Ponzi schemes, and you're, one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history is, you might find one of these Bernie Madoff, for example, and and you read about him, and you realize that he looked like George Washington, and he sounded very grave and sincere, and he was utterly charming. And so maybe you open your whole essay with what it would feel like to be conned by Bernie Madoff when he's actually asking you to invest with him, right? Sure, it's an imagined scenario, but maybe that would do the trick of grabbing your reader's attention. Or maybe you actually find that sort of information in your research, and you can actually piece together not an imaginary scenario, but something that really happened, and you're writing, say, in the eyes of one of the characters or one of the people involved. So just the description of a concrete event, could be a great way to open a research paper. The last one I put here, just because I wanted to try to keep this video within 20 minutes, is a question. Yeah, your very first sentence could be the core question your essay is trying to answer. It could be your first sentence. It could be the last sentence of that very small paragraph at the top. I don't know. You know, but sure, especially if your research, you started with a guiding question and your research has helped you answer it, then I think a great way to start this is to just present the reader with the question right away. All right, now you'll notice that one of the things I did not put there is, a paragraph that starts describing your topic in sort of a, macroscopic way, a big way, and then it funnels down to your specific thesis, and that your thesis has 3 points. I want you to move away from that. I have no idea at all why a thesis should have 3 prongs at the end. Why not 2? Why not 5? I mean, where did 3 come from? So that whole idea is a very artificial template to use in high school writing because it's easy to teach, it's easy to grade, it gives the student just a formula to follow. But let's really move away from formulaic approaches. Be a little more creative. Your thesis does not have to have 3 prongs. And you don't have to have 3 big paragraphs after that. No, please, let's get more professional and more creative, and you need to have more ownership in it. Now, if you do have a thesis that's like that, I'm going to be fair to you. I'll read it. If it works okay, you'll get your A. Don't worry about it. But I really would advise you to be moving away from that sort of thing. All right. So what about the middle? Notice I didn't put much at all because the middle is basically kind of common sense. I mean, this is where you're explaining your thought. Okay, so you have an observation that is hopefully not obvious. Not obvious. If it's obvious, why do you need to write a paper about it? Okay, so if it's not obvious, it needs unpacking. It needs explanation, right? And that's what you're doing right here in the middle, okay? And you really should think of yourself having a conversation with someone, and if you give them your observation, which you can present right away at the beginning, or you can just keep it for somewhere in the middle of the middle or the end, I don't know. But if you were to tell someone, hey, I've been researching this, and I've thought, and I've read a lot, and I've reached this conclusion, and you give them your conclusion, your thesis, your observation, they at that point should be saying, how did you get there? What do you mean by that? Because it's not automatically clear to me, that you're right. What's your reasons, right? Or they might be saying, what do you mean by this term? Or I don't even understand that. Explain it, and then tell me what your reasons are for believing it. And so how would you do that in real conversation? What would you say first? What do you think you need to say first to get this person on board and ready for the thing you need to say after that? And after that, it's a teaching process, isn't it? And it's in a linear path. And if you can just kind of maybe write a little bit of a flow chart down on a piece of paper to let you see, or a ladder saying, or a rope bridge, and say, look, when I'm at this rung, then I'm ready for this rung, and then I'm ready for the next run, and then I'm ready for the next run, and the next, and the next, linear, right? And once you got that plan, then just turn those into paragraphs, or, and just put them there, right? So now let's go ahead and talk about how you end. Okay, so when you end, there are strategies for this too. And as I had 4 at the top up here, I'll have 4 down here. One way is to extend your idea, right? If you had a certain idea about, you know, prevention from some sort of physical illness, right? Maybe you can extend it to how it might also prevent mental illness, mental health, or if you had a way to if you wanted to show what's going on in terms of athletes in a certain sport like basketball, and you wrote your paper about what it means to succeed there. Maybe you want to try to extend some of those concepts to football, right? Or to, soccer or some other major sport, baseball. If you're writing a paper as to the most effective way to start a small business, then maybe at the end you say, these are not only good principles for small for-profit businesses, but they can also be applied to nonprofit organizations as well. Okay, so you provide a way to show your reader that what you were talking about was really worthwhile, and if you get it, then you can use that to understand other phenomena that weren't mentioned in the paper. So that's extension. And that is the reward. Remember, you create interest, you maintain it, and you reward it. And the reward is, hey, I learned a new way to think about something, and I know how to, if it works here, maybe it'll work over here, and I can extend it over across certain lines of discipline or, usual thinking. So that's a very powerful way to do it. Maybe one way to do it is a call for further research. So maybe you decided to run a quick survey there at your college campus. You were trying to find out what really is the case concerning, say, study habits or sleeping habits of your peers, and you have something to present here in this small paper. But then in the closing, you might say, look, this was just one public school campus in northeastern Ohio. The numbers are interesting. I want to call for an extended research across public institutions in the United States. So you're extending it from statewide to, or from just part of the state, maybe to statewide or to nationwide. Now, it would, no one expects you to do that research. That's why you're issuing the call for further research, because you're out of your resources, you're out of time. Your job was just to get the idea rolling, right? But once the idea got it articulated, and then there was a little bit of proof of concept that you provided because it kind of worked out on your campus, then you can say, I just want to present this to the conversation, to the people writing on this, other researchers, other thinkers, and say, can someone extend it or, do further research on this? So that's a way to do it. Another way is to just talk about qualifications. Say, look, here you're closing, right? And this might be a good time for some of you to say, look, I made certain claims that seem to apply to this situation, but I'm under no illusion that it's a universal claim or it's going to always be that case. I want to think of it more of a probable explanation or whatnot. So you're qualifying, right? You're kind of moving away from, two generalizations that were too broadly spread, maybe in the middle, or from ideas that your readers might run with in a way that you didn't want them to run with it. So when you qualify your conclusion, you basically are saying, here are some ways where maybe it's not exactly as I thought it would be, or it's not to be applied as strictly as I thought it would be. Or, in other words, if you still have questions about what you found, right? That's how you would qualify it, right? You would say, I think I'm getting close to the answer, but I really don't know about this or this. I didn't get a chance to look into this area. So there, my conclusion might need to be modified down the line. That's qualification, right? Now, the last one is circularity. And circularity is it feels nice. It's sort of a literary device. Well, no, that's not. It's an attempt to circle back to your beginning. So whatever you mentioned up here, like let's say you mentioned that very specific event. You're describing maybe how it felt to be in a self-driving car. So down over here at the end, you might start your closing by bringing us back into that car. You see what I'm saying? So you're closing the circle. It's kind of like a sandwich technique if you want to think of it that way. But really, you started us off a sandwich in the sense that you brought us back to the bread on the top. With another piece of bread at the bottom. Same thing. But I'd like better the picture of a circle. You started us off with this concept, and then you moved us into the middle, and you took us all around in here, and then at the end, you're kind of reminding us again of what's at the top. Whatever it was, that strange quote, or you know, maybe you want to describe the rest of that event that you were describing very specifically. Okay, and so when the reader obviously sees that your essay is closing, because it's easy to see. I mean, we're at the bottom. We're at page 7 of 7, so we get the sense that there should be a closing somewhere. And when we realize that you are beginning to take us back to the beginning, we understand that as closure. All right. So now down here, you can actually combine a couple of these, and I suppose you might be able to combine a couple of these too. So if you feel that you can actually do 2 of these at once, and maybe 2 of these at once, whatever, that's fine. I just don't want you to get the idea that because I presented 4 up here, I expect to see all 4 in your beginning. And because I presented 4 down here, I expect to see all 4 in your ending. No, no, no. You might even have another whole different way to begin and end your paper that I didn't even list here. So, I'm giving you a lot of options here. But this is just a little bit of guidance as to how to organize your actual substance. Now, again, as far as the nitty-gritty of how many sources, how many words, just check the work folder for the last work folder for instructions on that. Hey, thank you for listening.